All right, quite a short lesson today because I will also be showing a video on how to deal with dividends. I'll show it live so that you can see how to deal with the next section of your DI. But today's lesson is about the idea of profit distribution. You got these two formula last lesson: dividends paid for preference shareholders and dividends paid for ordinary shareholders. If you did the timeline exercises, you worked out the dividends paid for a guy, like a person that has shares in a company. But you can also use the same formula to work out where the profits go within a whole company. So you're seeing where all the money goes across a whole company situation. Can you please note this? You will be tested on this, but you're not going to do this maths for the DI. You won't get enough information online to be able to do a profit distribution example for your investigation. So these are the same formulas as before. Dividends paid for preference is number of shares times par value times dividend rate is a decimal. Dividends paid for ordinary is the number of shares held times by the dividend per share. Now, the only thing that you need to deal with is remember the difference between preference and ordinary shareholders. What's special about preference people? When do they get their share of the profit? Do they get it first or last? First. They have to get their money first. So you need to work out how much profit is actually going to these people, then how much of that money goes to preference shareholders first, then you can work out the dividend per share that the ordinary people get later, and then you can work out everything from there. So I'll give you some writing time for that little note there and also the example, and then I'll do the example together with you. So like 5 minutes. Later when you're working, I'll be checking your timeline program. Oh, no, actually, I did that on Tuesday. People that are away on Tuesday, I need to check your timeline progress to work out whether I need to give Miss Charlton or Miss Fennerty a warning. I can say they name their adults. They can deal with it. All right, if you're still writing, that's fine. We'll do the example here, do bits of it at a time. A company has a share capital that's made up of 1 million. So this company is made up of 1 million $2 par value, 10% preference shares. So it's made up of 1 million preference shares. Those preference shareholders are always going to get 10% of $2 regardless how much money the company makes. And it's also made up of 5 million ordinary shares. The company makes a profit of $1.2 million, but they're hanging on to 30% of that profit for tax and $150,000 for replacing assets. Part A, find the amount of profit available for all the shareholders. Is the company going to share all 1.2 million to their shareholders? They're going to hang on to a little bit. What are they going to hang on to? 30% of that for tax, and then another 150 grand on top of that. So I need to do maths for one of them. I need to work out what 30% of 1.2 million is. What's 30% as a decimal? 0.3. Good. So 0.3 times by 1200, 0, 0, 0, 0.3 times by 1200, 0, 0, 0. That's on 360 grand for tax. So profit to share is going to be that 1.2 million minus the 360,000 they're keeping for tax, minus, are they hanging on to something else as well? How much? How much are they hanging on to for replacing assets? 150 grand. So you work that out. I didn't need to do maths for that. 1200,000 minus 360,000 minus 150,000. 690,000. Nice. 690,000. That's B. That's A done, sorry. B, find the total dividend paid to the preference shareholders. So we've just worked out that 690 grand is going to be shared. But what's special about preference shareholders? They get a set percentage of that. They're always going to get that. How do I find the dividend paid to all the preference shareholders? I have the dividend paid formula up here. Dividend paid for preference shareholders is this formula here. Number of shares times by the par value times by the dividend rate. So, div paid for preference. How many preference shareholders are in this company? Which number is telling me that? Which one? Is it the 500,000 ordinary? Is it the 1 million $2 par value? 1 million, yeah. 1 million times by the par value. What does the question say the par value is? $2 times by what is 10% as a decimal? 0.1. 1 million times by 2 times by 0.1. So the preference shareholders are going to share 200 grand. They must get that. So we've just worked out A, we've just worked out B. C, find the dividend per share per ordinary share. Well, I can't work that out straight away because do I have a number here telling me how much goes to the ordinary people yet? Do I have the numbers I need to find them? Yes. So if I know that there's $690,000 to share with all the shareholders, but 200 grand goes to the preference people, well, the leftovers is what the ordinary people get. So the ordinary people are going to share $490,000 to ordinary people. Now I can find the dividend per share because how many ordinary shares are there? There's 5 million of them. And they're sharing 490,000. So what maths would I do between those two numbers? Yes?
490,000 divided
Good.
by 5 million.
So div per share is going to be 490 grand divided by the 5 million ordinary shares that it's going to be shared between. 490 grand divided by 5 million. 0.098. So 0.098, which is 9.8 cents per share. So we've just done C. I'm going to finish it for the sake of completion. D, so now we're looking, so all of this was the whole company, but then D is asking you, find the total dividend money received by a shareholder. So we're going back and focusing on one person. If you had an ordinary shareholder that had 2,000 preference shares, so div paid for pref, for this one person, they had 2,000 preference shares. They were $2 and they were 10%. 10% is a decimal, 0.1. 2,000 times 2 times 0.1. They would get, this particular person would get $400 from their preference shares, and then div paid for ordinary is going to be, how many ordinary shares does this person have? 5,000 times by the dividend per share, which is 0.098. 5,000 times 0.098, 490. Does that answer the question yet? I've got the two separate dividends, but part D, what is it asking for? Find the total dividend money. So what do I need to do to these two numbers here? Add them together. So total is going to be $890 in div money. I will give you some writing type for that. Remember, this math is not, this calculation you're not going to do in your DI. It will be a test question, okay? So I'll stop the recording now.